This is Northern Light for Thursday, August 13th. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. President Trump's 50% tariff on many Canadian goods is scheduled to take effect next week. The uncertainty is straining businesses that rely on cross-border trade.
I need to do one of two things. I'm going to either order today before the tariffs kick in, or then I'm going to wait until there's relief in those tariffs.
Also on the show, this week marks the 249th anniversary of the end of the siege at Fort Stanwix. We visit the site during a reenactment.
It's a very important strategic post that plays a critical role in the revolution, right? To capture Fort Stanwix is a necessary part of the American strategy.
And dozens of the country's top pro anglers are in the North Country this month to compete for the title of Angler of the Year. Coming up, the Bassmaster Elite Series and its northern swing from Lake Champlain to the St. Lawrence River.
All that's coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us. Support for Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio comes from Zach Hoyt Banjos, etc. in Piercefield, offering handcrafted and custom banjos, guitars, fiddles, and mandolins. More at hoytbanjos.com. And from Seacom Credit Union, home of the Mula Mula Kids account and the Spin the Wave, helping children get started saving. Details at seacom.org. NCUA. This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. President Donald Trump announced last month that he's imposing 50% tariffs on many Canadian goods, from cheese and wine to building materials like plywood and cement. They're scheduled to take effect this Wednesday unless two countries strike a deal before that date. As Richard Haller reports, uncertainty surrounding these tariffs is already putting businesses in the North Country under stress.
The scent of sawdust, diesel fumes, and cedar sap hangs in the air at a lumber yard in Rensselaer Falls, a small hamlet in St. Lawrence County, just 15 miles south of the Canadian border. Two younger men are loading narrow white pine boards onto the forks of a small loading machine. They slip thin strips of wood between the boards to create air gaps. This business, JP Building Supply, stores and sells all types of building materials and gets about a third of its supply from Canada. That includes sheathing like plywood, which is threatened with a tariff that could double the import cost. Matthew Morse from Norfolk is strapping down a bundle of white pine. He says he's not concerned about the tariffs himself.
It'll allow for more commerce in the country and not outsourcing to other countries. You know what I'm saying? It's trying to start giving our own companies business.
But his boss, James Putman, the owner of the business, says that if these tariffs really do move forward, they are in trouble.
I mean, that's going to affect us tremendously. I mean, if things bump up 50%, that means we have to add on 50%. Because we've got to obviously, we got to put it on to the customer, and that's just going to push everything else up.
For the past year and a half, the Trump administration has aggressively tariffed Canada. But after the Supreme Court ruled in February that Trump didn't have the authority to impose certain tariffs by executive order, the government had to refund around $100 billion. Now it's imposing new tariffs under a different provision that had never been used before by a U.S. president. Across the border in Canada, Hank Vetter is a sales manager at the Wood Source, a lumber business in Ottawa that ships 60% of its product to the U.S. He says the threat of these tariffs alone already impacts his U.S. customers like home builders and contractors.
They say, hey, if that 50% is coming in, I need to do one of two things. I'm going to either order today before the tariffs kick in, or then I'm going to wait until there's relief in those tariffs.
Vetter says these tariffs are causing a domino effect, raising import costs on specific items, which then pushes companies to raise all of their prices.
So then that affects the contractor because he's trying to get this house built on time for his customer. And then that affects the supply chain because if the contractor is not ordering the material, then the supply chain is weakened.
In central New York, A.J. Warmoth owns a dairy farm and also chairs the Northeast Dairy Producers Association. He hopes the U.S. and Canada reach a better trade deal. But existing tariffs, like on steel and aluminum, stacked with the uncertainty, have already created economic pressure.
So a lot of people are building barns, a lot of people are investing in their operations. It just raises the cost on everything. Cement, steel, those costs have escalated exponentially.
These new tariffs cover a slew of items coming out of Canada. Everything from chandeliers to ice skates to dairy and alcohol. Amy Magnus is a customs broker based in St. Albans, Vermont, and helps businesses calculate tariffs when shipping across the border. She says she's never seen anything like this before in her 40 years of experience.
I am telling my customers, please check the lists and see if you have any products that appear on those lists. If you do have, let's say, all these shipments of ice skates that you want to bring into the United States, bring them in right now.
Tourism and cross-border traffic between the two countries have dropped dramatically in the North Country since Trump started imposing new tariffs in his second term. Magnus says she's concerned that these new heightened tariffs will deepen a wound between Canada and the U.S.
The people in the North Country area enjoyed going back and forth to Canada, for example, to go to Montreal and all that it provides in terms of theater or sporting events or shopping or fine dining, all those things.
She says the North Country and Canada have always had a warm relationship.
And they've enjoyed our mountains or, for skiing or our beaches along the lake. I think that there's a chill in that friendliness that we've all shared.
Inside a hardware store in Ogdensburg, Ernest McEthron from Governor says these tariffs are painful. Half of his family lives in Canada.
I have a reunion coming up at the first part of August. I'm not even going to the reunion because I don't dare cross the border.
This trade war has already had an impact, shutting down local businesses and hiking costs. But it's also sharpening the risk of further dividing communities at the border. Hank Vetter from the Wood Source in Ottawa says he believes the U.S. and Canada need to support each other, not build walls that shut out trade and community. Richard Haller, North Country Public Radio.
A new poll shows that Governor Kathy Hochul with a double-digit lead over her Republican challenger, Bruce Blakeman. But the race seems to be tightening. Jimmy Vielkind with the New York Public News Network reports.
A Siena University poll of likely voters finds 49% of New Yorkers ready to support the Democratic governor for re-election and 39% behind her challenger, Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman. Hochul's lead has narrowed in Siena surveys as pollsters included more Republicans in their sample, reflecting likely voter turnout. But poll spokesman Steve Greenberg says Hochul is trailing other Democrats in the heavily Democratic state.
The fact that she's only up by 10 has to give Republicans some hope and has to give Democrats some pause.
A Hochul spokesperson says the contrast with Blakeman is clear. Blakeman's campaign says other polls show a closer race. In Albany, I'm Jimmy Vielkind for the New York Public News Network.
This is NCPR. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 10 after 8. Good morning. I'm Monica Standreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. Stick around. We'll check in as anglers head out on Lake Champlain, competing for the Bassmasters Angler of the Year.
That's coming up in just a few minutes here on Northern Light. First, we'll hear a little more music from the Wickmore Jazz Trio. out of Plattsburgh. Support for Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio comes from St. Lawrence Nurseries, Potsdam, providing the North Country with cold, hardy fruit and nut trees for over 100 years. slngrow.com. And from the Lake Placid Sinfonietta, live orchestral music in the heart of the Adirondacks through August 16th. Performance schedule and more at lakeplacidsinfonietta.org. Support also comes from you. NCPR strives to be a voice for people who are underserved in the North Country, and it's a place for all of us to connect to news, music, and information. Consider what that's worth to you. Whatever amount you can give, your donation matters. Give now at ncpr.org/give. And thank you so much for your ongoing support.
The Adirondack Park Agency will vote on 2 projects at its monthly meeting today. One involves a new boat launch in Saranac Lake, and the other is a logging project in southern St. Lawrence County. Emily Russell has the details.
A logging company wants to cut trees on 680 acres of land in the town of Colton. The property is about 20 minutes west of Tupper Lake. Lime Timber Company is applying for a permit from the APA to clear cut about 8 of those acres. Loggers would leave just the white pine trees behind. On the remaining 672 acres, the company plans to do a kind of logging called seed tree establishment. According to the permit application, Lime Timber would harvest undesirable trees. The property was damaged by the 1998 ice storm. The goal is to leave healthy seed trees behind, like maple, cherry, and spruce trees. The second project up for a vote is a new boat launch in Saranac Lake. The village wants to build an ADA-accessible launch for paddlers on Lake Flower. According to the permit application, it would be the first of its kind in the area. To build the boat launch at Baldwin Park, the village would have to remove the existing tennis and basketball courts. The plan is to build a nearly 10-foot-long dock and install other support structures, such as a bench and a railing at the new boat launch. Along with voting on those 2 projects, the APA board will also hear 2 presentations at its meeting. One is about the state's goal of conserving 30% of its lands and waters by 2030. The other presentation will be about conservation easements. The meeting begins at 9:30 a.m. and is open to the public, either to stream online or attend in person at the APA's headquarters in Raybrook. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio.
The state's utilities are hoping New York regulators will allow them to generate power themselves instead of relying on independent producers. As Samuel King with the New York Public News Network reports, some say that might not be in the best interest of ratepayers.
The state forced utilities to sell power plants in the 1990s to help boost competition in energy markets. Now, the Public Service Commission is considering whether to allow the companies to generate wind and solar power. The utilities say it would help meet the state's climate goals and shore up the electric grid. Ari Pesco is the executive director of the Electricity Law Initiative at Harvard Law School. He says it's unclear what the change would mean for energy costs.
So a lot of this is about, who bears the risk from projects that don't turn out the way the developer intended. And when utilities build projects, they put the risk on the public.
The change faces opposition from the Independent Power Producers of New York, which has launched a 6-figure campaign to fight it. There's no timeline on when state regulators could make a decision. In Albany, I'm Samuel King for the New York Public News Network.
A Schenectady-based newspaper group has acquired 2 more North Country Weekly newspapers. The sale of the Tupper Lake Free Press and the Governor Tribune Press to the Gazette News Group were finalized this week. Dan McClellan has owned both papers for decades. He told the Adirondack Daily Enterprise that he was months away from closing them when he connected with the leader of the news group. He will continue to write and edit the Free Press, which will still go out on Wednesdays. The Tribune will continue to go out on Fridays.
According to the Enterprise, the paper's layout will change and they'll get new websites, but the content should stay the same. There will be more regional coverage and additions like puzzles. This move further expands the Gazette News Group's footprint in the North Country. The organization purchased the Adirondack Daily Enterprise and Lake Placid News in March.
Developers of a long-awaited affordable housing project in the Tri-Lakes are expected to break ground later this month. The Adirondack Explorer reports an official groundbreaking ceremony at the former Ovalwood Dish Factory in Tupper Lake is scheduled for August 24th. The factory's redevelopment will add 80 apartments to the local housing stock. It follows 7 years of planning, permitting, and fundraising. Public funding for the $46 million project includes state and federal tax credits and Downtown Revitalization Initiative grant money. Developers hope to complete construction by the end of the year. The plan is to pre-lease the apartments beginning next summer, with residents moving in before 2028.
As Americans continue to celebrate the country in its 250th year, we look back to the year 1777 and the siege of Fort Stanwix. This week marks the anniversary of the end of the siege. Today, the fort still stands in Rome in central New York. The New York Public News Network's Boone Kilpatrick recently visited it during one of its many reenactments.
To the right! Face!
Every year, as the nation celebrated its independence, Fort Stanwix's garrison marched in formation before the document they were fighting for.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
This reenactment we do is pretty accurate. Of course, all this is replica, but even down to the certain musket cartridge boxes that we carry were considered the most accurate to the soldiers that were here during the 1777 siege.
Chris Jakubowski and his militia performed the 250-year-old ceremony honoring the patriots who fought and died for freedom here at Fort Stanwix, when in August 1777, a year after independence was declared, a force of 1,500 British, Loyalists, Haudenosaunee, and Hessians laid siege to the fort.
Fort Stanwix is a critical strategic stronghold. It is a fort that is built out in the middle of the United Nations.
Rob Searing is the curator at the Onondaga Historical Association. The siege was meant to divert American forces from Saratoga, but the men and women under 28-year-old Colonel Peter Gansevoort held out without relief for 3 weeks under near constant fire, helping turn the tide of the war.
So it's a very important strategic post that plays a critical role in the revolution, right? To capture Fort Stanwix is a necessary part of the American strategy.
A relief column of local militia was massacred at Oriskany Creek in the first week of the siege, losing half of an 800-man force. But the British had blundered.
They did not come prepared. They only came with 3- and 6-pound cannons, which aren't going to do anything to these walls.
The fort's massive timber walls shielded all but 12 of the 802 souls inside. Many were wounded, including the wife of a soldier, Nancy McCarty, who was 9 months pregnant.
Mrs. McCarty had a chunk of flesh the size of a man's fist taken out of her bottom.
That's reenactor Valerie Morgan.
The very next day, she delivered her baby girl in one of the areas in the fort being used as a temporary hospital.
While most women were evacuated before the siege, it is important to remember that thousands of women traveled with the soldiers of the Revolution. Morgan is a link to that past.
One of my tasks here is to, A, make connections, bring people closer to 250 years ago, to help people understand that we're really not that different.
She and the other reenactors make a point to connect at every level.
A teenage girl walks in. I tell them, well, golly, Captain Moody had his 15-year-old daughter here.
Every reenactor here is a volunteer, just as the men of 1777 were. Only these men and women of modern times were afforded the time to rehearse and train for months and even years. The men and women of 1777 were given just weeks.
3 cheers for the United States of America. Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip.
It's all to ensure every visitor's experience at the indomitable Fort Stanwix is as true to life as it was 250 years ago today. In Rome, Boone Kilpatrick for the New York Public News Network.
This is NCPR. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 20 after 8. Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. Stick around after the show for Bird Note. That's coming up at 8:42. With our eyes to the skies, sunset in Mineville is at 8:02 tonight, and the moon is a waxing crescent at just 1% of full.
Isolated to scattered showers and thunderstorms are expected again this afternoon as a storm system moves into the region. Conditions should be drier and quieter tomorrow and Saturday as we head into the weekend, though. And not too much humidity expected. And temperatures should be in the lower 70s to near 80s today and for the next couple of days. At last check, it was 67 degrees in Black River, 58 degrees in Paul Smiths and in Saranac Lake, too, 62 degrees in Plattsburgh, and 17 degrees in Cornwall.
The top professional anglers in the U.S. are here in the North Country fishing their tails off to earn the title of Angler of the Year. The Bassmaster Elite Series is the highest level of professional bass fishing tournaments. They'll finish the series in the Thousand Islands later this month.
And today and through the weekend, they're out on Lake Champlain. Dan Ladd is the editor of the sportsman's newspaper, New York Outdoor News. He's covering the Bassmaster for the paper. And he says more than 100 anglers launched from the Plattsburgh City Marina earlier this morning.
They could be anywhere on the lake by now. They launched at, I think, 6:30 in the morning, and they have very fast boats. These bass boats can really haul. And they've just spent some earlier part of this week practicing on the lake, finding spots, finding fish. So they're going to those spots. I'm sure they're analyzing the weather, the conditions, the water temperature, and they're saying, okay, I think the fish are going to be biting here. I found them here. And if you read some of the stories that are printed, after a tournament, when they interview an angler and they talk about how they won the tournament, they're always saying, I found this spot in practice, or I found this pattern. When I say pattern, it's lure, the combination of the rod and reel, the technique. And just like any other sport, some people are better at some things than others. And so when they find a place where they can do something that's to their forte, so to speak, then, their odds improve, their confidence soars. But they could be anywhere on the lake right now. I believe they can be in Vermont with a few exceptions. But I know a guy named Steve Kennedy. He has told me in the past how he runs all the way down to South Bay, down near Whitehall, to fish. A lot of other guys go up, into the Isles, Grand Isle, wherever. They could be anywhere. Again, it comes down to what they found probably during practice for this first day. That's where they're going to start because everybody wants to have a good first day.
Well, in a twist on the competition is that the anglers aren't allowed to use forward-facing sonar. Briefly, what is forward-facing sonar and why does it matter that they can't use it?
Well, there's certain tournaments they can use it and certain ones they can't. And the schedule this year has allowed for both. It's the latest, greatest. It basically provides an underwater picture of what's happening. I've never used it in my life. I'll be the last one to tell you that I'm the world's greatest fisherman. I fish out of a canoe most of the time and use the same old rubber worm on a hook, and that's how I catch bass. But of course, I'm not doing it for a living. But it's definitely the latest, greatest technology. So I'm good with the fact that they're not using it. And we just ran an article in New York Outdoor News that questioned, whether this is going too far. Is it too much technology? Is it an unfair advantage? On the other hand, people that go fishing, they want to catch fish. So the FSS, as we call it, it's definitely the latest, greatest thing out there. I guess you'd call it the fishing equivalent of AI. That might be a good way to put it.
From what you've heard, what do these anglers think of Lake Champlain?
In 2005, I was fortunate enough to go to the Bassmaster Classic, which is what everyone calls the Super Bowl of bass fishing. And I was a guest on a media boat with an angler named Gary Klein. And he, at that point in his career, had fished everywhere. And Lake Champlain was in his top 5. And when you speak with anglers about Lake Champlain, I bet you if you asked any one of them where it ranked, it would rank, if not in their top 5, it'd be close. And the St. Lawrence would be right there too. But Champlain brings a lot to the table because it's a huge, massive body of water. and it's loaded with bass. But what a lot of anglers have told me that I've interviewed over the years is they come for the smallmouth bass fishing. The southern lakes don't have a lot of smallmouth. Some of the rivers maybe, but the farther north you go, the more smallmouth there are. Then I bet you'll hear anglers on the podium today and tomorrow and Saturday and Sunday say they targeted smallmouth. And it just fires them up when they catch them. For the average fisherman or fisherwoman who is just wetting a line, the difference between a 12-inch smallmouth and a 12-inch largemouth, the smallmouth are just fighting fish. They're just feisty and they're muscular and they're a lot of fun to catch. And sometimes they're in the same water column, maybe, if you want to put it that way, as largemouth, but a lot of times it's an entirely different environment that they're thriving in within a body of water's ecosystem. So the appeal of Lake Champlain is definitely the lake as a fishery itself.
You'll be there tomorrow to watch. So take us there. What will you be able to see from where you are?
Well, the one thing that we're fortunate is to be able to get on a media boat and take a ride out on Lake Champlain. So, this isn't a pontoon boat. This isn't, a sea cruiser or something that you're sitting in that you're, swimming out of or enjoying a day on the lake with. This is a boat that's made for fishing. They're basically a speedboat, flat decked. Some have one motor, some have two. They're usually very powerful, over a couple 100 miles per hour. You got to hang on. I take my gear and I keep it in a pack and I keep it attached to me. You don't just set your camera on the dashboard or anything like that. But it's quite a trip. And, you can really see everything from these boats. You're on a deck boat. So they're great to photograph from because everything's at water level.
What are you curious to see tomorrow?
I'm curious to see how they do with the smallmouth. Lake Champlain touches the shores of my hometown in Washington County, which is Fort Ann. And it's an important body of water. So I'm always looking at the quality of the fish that come from there as a pure local interest for myself. And the next thing I'll be doing is hanging around for the weigh-in to photograph that, which is always exciting because you get to hear the stories, you get to hear the anglers talk about the day they had, what worked, what didn't. And on Friday, they'll be making the cut. I think they cut it down to either 25 or 30. I don't know how many anglers are out there fishing today and tomorrow, but it's over 100. And then there's a cut, just like a golf tournament. So there'll be fewer and fewer fishing in the next 2 days after Friday. But getting back to the question, I hope to cover a lot of ground when I'm up there tomorrow, get a lot of photos, get some interviews, and come back with a couple of stories for the future. Obviously, we'll report on the tournament, and I always find something, and sometimes you just don't know what that's going to be. I'm not just there for the boat ride, but it's fun.
Dan Ladd is the editor of New York Outdoor News. He's covering the Bassmaster Elite Series. The anglers are competing on Lake Champlain today through Sunday. They'll wrap up the series in Clayton later this month.
That's it for the show today. Stick around for news headlines from NPR coming up next.
Also, send in the sounds of the North Country. We want to hear from you, whether it's splashing in a swimming hole, revving engines at the dirt track, casting a fishing line, scooping up ice cream. Grab your phone, open the voice memo or voice recorder app, and get nice and close and hit record. Then share it with us, news@ncpr.org, and you just might hear it on the air.
If you miss an episode of Northern Light, you can always listen back to the archive at any place you get your podcasts.
That's it for the show. Our theme music is by Danny Thomas. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. Be well.
3 cheers for the United States of America. Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah!